Awesome. Colin, thank you so much for joining me, man. Pleasure to be here with you. Maybe the best place to start, do you want to kind of tell us a little bit about like your story and, how you kind of got to where you are today?
Um, so I guess it all starts back in high school when I was deciding what I wanted to do with my life. And this was back when I was, 17 years old, like a junior in high school, and trying to decide, on going to different college visits and trying to decide what I wanted to do. So I was back and forth between like engineering. I also had looked into being basically an MD, like going to medical school. Um, and at the time, my older brother was dating a girl, and she was a physician assistant. And she started telling me about it. And I'd literally never heard of physician assistants. And from the what she how she explained it, it sounded like it was a pretty nice deal. A little more flexible than an MD. You don't have to go to school as long. You don't have to specialize. So I was like, okay, well, there's this happy medium. Because I was really into health and nutrition and exercise, but I looked at like nutritionist dietetics type of degrees, and ultimately they just didn't make a lot of money. And money's not everything, but I knew that I kind of had a certain worth or a certain value of myself in mind, and it wasn't there. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll probably be able to do that as a PA, explain to my patients how health and exercise is all a part of being healthy in general. And so then, I got into a PA school and was going through the schooling. So I did my undergraduate portion. And then I got to the graduate school, which was like the intensive actual, medical training. And I just started to realize, like, throughout all of the education, that I wasn't super into it. I wasn't like buying in, like a lot of my colleagues were. So everything was very like symptom pill based. It was like we were memorizing slide after slide of like, okay, well, if a patient presents with this, what do we give them? How do we treat this? And it just seemed like, I was like not fully into it. Even if we'd be studying at night, for exams, of course I had to study for exams, but I'd be like researching herbal remedies and like ways to lower cortisol and like biohacking and all of these different things that I wasn't learning in PA school. And then I got to the clinical portion of the program, which is like you're doing rotations through multiple specialties. So, primary care, emergency medicine, surgery, a little bit of everything. So you get a taste and you get, to see what you like and to get the education on those things. And this for me was like a huge realization. I went through this rough patch where I was like, I don't really know if I made the right choice on my career, because I didn't find it fulfilling. Like a lot of and it could have just been my experience, my rotations, or the practitioners that I was working with, but a lot of it was like spend 5 minutes with the patient and prescribe like a steroid or an antibiotic, and then like push them out the door and see the next patient. And it was this very like rushed, surface level. There was no talk of nutrition or sleep or stress. There was none of that. And I was like, man, this is not what I thought it was going to be. So I started to like really question if that was what I wanted to do, but I was already really invested, not only financially, because it's a big investment, but my time. I was deep into that degree. And so I started looking into functional medicine, integrative medicine, all of these type of alternative practices. And so I get close to graduation and start applying to these types of jobs. And basically all of them just told me, you don't have any experience. You didn't have any clinical rotations in this. All that you have is that, you do research on your own and you experiment on yourself and you take supplements. Like that's not enough for us to hire you. Right. And so I was like, yeah, I guess that makes sense. So I just ended up taking the first job I was offered, which was in surgery, which was fine. Not my passion, but I had to pay the bills. So I took that job, and literally for the next 2.5 years, I worked in surgery, and the entire time I was looking for a way out. So, I did a good job at my, when I went to work, but when I went home, I was, doing more research. I was going to conferences. I was shadowing functional medicine doctors, and doing a lot of networking. And then eventually, I found a place that kind of took a chance on me, or took, um, the resume wasn't necessarily there, because, you have to have certain certifications and certain types of education that I didn't necessarily have on paper, but I knew that if I could talk to them and they could see me in person and they could see that, wow, he has the knowledge and that he can really take care of patients the right way, then he'd be a great addition to the team. And that's kind of what happened here, in Tampa. I found a really good clinic, and things have been good ever since. So that was kind of long-winded, but that's a bit about my story.
No, man, that's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. And like one of the things I kind of wanted to kind of unpack in there is like you mentioned that, when you were in school or wherever that was, they never really talked about like these other things, like, where it comes to just the band-aid approach of here, take this pill, or here, just, take this, whatever, versus actually treating the cause, right? So like why do you think that is? Like why don't we focus on these like integrative functional medicine?
Well, everyone's gonna, call you a conspiracy theorist for saying this, but it's probably due to money. It's hard to deny when you look at how much money the insurance companies are making and how much money the pharmaceutical companies are making. It's hard to deny that that's why the system runs the way it does. Everyone can say, well, we still want people to be healthy. And yes, I agree. People that go into medicine are well intentioned. They want to help people. But the system isn't really designed in that way. Uh, Even with the best intentions, you're still kind of stuck in this model that revolves around prescribing pharmaceuticals so that, the insurance companies get a kickback and the pharmaceutical companies profit, and it becomes more about the profits of these huge oligarchies rather than the health of the patients.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man.
And we
I
need to get further down the line into how these are all tied into big agriculture, and how the food system is all tied in, because even that is designed for profits. You see in certain countries, like I know you're in Australia. I know in Europe, there's, hundreds, thousands of ingredients in our food, in our chemicals, in our shampoos and soaps that are banned in other countries that, in the US, Western medicine, even are, not banned here, and it's for profits.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. Like I completely agree. Like money makes the world go round, and when you could jeopardize $1 trillion industry and cut their profits in half, then yeah, there's a good reason why the system can run like that. And it wasn't until like I'd met people like in real life who had experimented with like functional medicine and alternative medicine, whatever you call it, and then it really opened my eyes. I'm like, holy shit, if that's possible, right? Then like what else is out there that, is possible? And like with that said, like has there been like any crazy experiences of like someone that you guys have been able to sort of help that came to you with something that, is pretty dire?
Yeah, I have a lot of stories. There's one I can think of in particular, and this is a woman who, she's in her late 30s, early 40s. And she came in, just kind of presenting with a lot of fatigue. Um, and she wanted to get her hormones checked out. And so, we get her hormones checked, and we're doing the whole history, and she's on a blood pressure medication, which it's actually a beta blocker, which technically is a blood pressure medication, but it's used for other things. So technically, it just kind of slows your heart rate.
Yeah.
And she was taking it for headaches. So I guess some neurologist said that at some point, they thought she had a seizure, but it was never confirmed by EEG. It was never really confirmed. He just kind of thought, I think you have seizures, and we're giving this medication to prevent seizures and to prevent migraines, because she was having these chronic migraines. um but one of the main side effects with that medication is fatigue. Another side effect is weight gain. So what we decided was, based on the blood work we saw, her thyroid function also wasn't optimal. So what we said is, we want you to slowly taper off of this beta blocker that we don't really think you need. You can talk to your neurologist about this, but we don't see any indication for you to need this. So we want you to taper off of this, and we also want you to take this natural, thyroid supplementation, thyroid hormone, not a synthetic, not like Synthroid or levothyroxine. This was a desiccated thyroid gland. And she's done so well. She can't thank us enough, can't praise us enough, because she lost weight, she has more energy, she hasn't had any of these migraines or headaches. So that was just a really cool example. I see it a lot, but an example of how that reflex that these physicians have to just prescribe a pill rather than to say, well, maybe where are the headaches coming from? Could it be stress? Could it be thyroid function? Because even low thyroid function can be linked to headaches. So yeah, that's one that I can think of.
No, it's interesting, man. And yeah, like as you said before, like when they're financially incentive, when doctors are financially incentivized to just go, yep, here's the solution to your headache, they make money, pharmaceutical companies make money. It's no wonder. Like, so I lived in America for a couple of years, right? Without being rude, it was a crazy different culture there in terms of prescription medication, right? I feel like a
Yeah.
lot of people I know in Australia, they won't take anything unless they are really, really sick, and they might take like a cold and flu tablet. I was in America, people just pop pills for fun. It's like, oh yeah, I felt I sneezed, so I took some Adderall or something like that. You know what I mean? It was kind of like it was just very normal there. It's like a cultural thing. I don't know specifically if the financial incentives are different there for doctors compared to here, but I feel like stuff's harder to get here a lot of the time as well. But yeah, man, like it was definitely like an eye-opening experience. But without going into too much on that, like for everyday people, like based on your knowledge, experience, all these things, like what's one or two things that people could do differently that you see most people doing that would make a drastic impact on their health, both maybe short term and long term.
Well, it's to stop eating the standard American diet is probably the biggest thing. And I might be biased because I really focus on nutrition, but the average person just has no idea about what to put in their mouth. Like, it's insane, some of the stuff I hear, and I don't really blame them, because there's so much confusion. You have the mainstream, you have the food pyramid and the my plate recommendations, and you have like even some of the stuff we've seen recently where they appointed some sort of health advisor, President Biden did, and she's saying that obesity is completely uncontrollable. You can't control it with lifestyle, it's genetic, there's nothing you can do. They also just released another thing saying that Lucky Charms are healthier. I don't know if you've seen this, but Lucky Charms are somehow healthier than steak and eggs. And
Oh
it's
my
just like,
God, man, it's getting
they are
insane.
really they're really
You got to be an
confusing.
idiot to believe that.
Right. And they're just really confusing people. So, I mean, people are lost and they don't know where to turn. And there's so many things coming from different directions. You shouldn't eat carbs. You should eat carbs. Saturated fats, horrible for you. The vegan diet is best. No, you should do keto. And it's like, uh, it's an overload of information that the average person doesn't know how to sift through. They don't know how to sort through that massive amount of information that is often confusing and conflicting and based ultimately on poor research and biased research, because these researchers are human. They're still susceptible to greed and financial incentives, and just mistakes in general, like making mistakes in their research. So yeah, it's hard for the average person. So I guess to get back to nutrition is the biggest thing. And without shilling my own products, I've got an ebook on this, on, kind of what to eat and why, that digs into a lot of this. I think that's a great resource, but there's a lot of good resources out there. You just kind of have to know how to sort through it all. So nutrition's a big piece. The other one I think is stress. Um, it's so pervasive, and it's not like it's hard for me to think about this because I know that past generations, you think of like World War II, right? These people had a ton of stress. The Great Depression, those people had a ton of stress. We do too, but just in different ways. And I think a big part of it is just environmentally, we have all of these toxins and chemicals and things around us that are doing stress that we can't even see.
Mm.
So you have to find a way to not only lower your mental stress, but to cut out the stressors from the environment. So a couple ways you can do that. One, you have to improve your sleep. And we can dig into a whole topic on how to improve your sleep, but ultimately you have good sleep, your stress is low, it lowers cortisol. And then cutting out a lot of these stressors like the harmful blue light, the chemicals in your soaps, eating organic so you're not exposed to pesticides like glyphosate that we know cause cancer. So lowering stress not only is lowering cortisol, but lowering these environmental stressors.
Mm. That's a great point. Like, I'm curious about the sleep thing because, like, this is a kind of question for my own benefit here. Like, I sleep amazing. Like, I sleep like a baby every night. I wake up and I feel pretty tired most mornings, right? And so, like, I feel it's quite common. Like, and there's part of me that refuses to believe that it's been like that for forever. Like, I refuse to believe that hundreds of years ago, people woke up and they just feel tired. They got to have coffees to get themselves up. They just got up and, you know, got to work. So, like, what do you think causes that specifically? Or maybe like a couple of things?
Um, it's funny because I've heard people say that the default state of the organism, of the human organism, is fatigue. And I don't know. I don't know if I really buy into that. Because there's been times where when I'm doing everything right, my sleep is amazing and I spring out of bed. And I think a lot of this is cortisol, or not cortisol. A lot of it is hormonal. So the reason I said cortisol is because that when you first wake up out of bed, your cortisol should be high to get you out of bed and to get you going in the morning. A lot of what that is it's set by your internal clock, your circadian rhythm. So when you wake up, a lot of times one of the best things you can do, and sometimes what I'll do is when I'm answering work calls in the morning, luckily I have this flexibility. I know not everyone does. But when I'm answering work calls in the morning, I walk outside and I make sure that I'm getting sun within the first 30 minutes. The sun is going into my eyeballs, it's on my skin, and inside of me, my brain is saying, okay, well, we know it's morning. We know it's time to secrete cortisol. And we know that, in 16 hours, we're going to be starting to release melatonin and it's going to be bedtime. So sunlight is huge. Setting that internal clock is a big, big part of it. Hormones are another huge part of optimal sleep. So like I said, with the cortisol, if you have adrenal fatigue, which could come from a number of things, then your cortisol's off, your thyroid is off. And then even if you are getting good sleep or getting a lot of sleep, it doesn't feel like restful because when you're waking up, those hormones that are supposed to wake you up aren't. And then of course, when your hormones aren't optimized, then your stress is high, makes it harder to fall asleep, makes the sleep not as deep. So those are some big pieces. I think light is one of the biggest. Again, lowering stress as much as you can. There's supplements that can deepen your sleep for sure. And then you can even get further down the rabbit hole into things that, enhance GABA or even enhance growth hormone that will deepen the quality of your sleep. But this is something that even I haven't mastered. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to say that I always get perfect sleep because I don't. It's hard in the world that we live in. So it's always something I'm working on. But those are some big areas: just light, and lowering stress, and all optimizing your hormones.
Yeah, no, regardless, that was super valuable. And like I definitely I do the exact same thing with the light, right? Whenever I get up in the morning, typically the first hour and a half, I literally get on my laptop and I sit on the balcony because the sun rises directly in front of the balcony and I'm just out there and like, you get that morning sun and then it gets to around like 6:37 and you get that the sun, get a little bit of a tan and like, and you kind of hit that sunlight for the day, right? Like you don't need to spend 4 hours in the sun, I'm sure. It's like, 30 to 60 minutes is typically um recommended. But yeah, man, I think, maybe that does help me a lot. I think the biggest problem with me is that I hate to say I have to because it's a crutch, but I pretty much have to watch YouTube every night before bed, right? Like I work all day, I go to the gym, I eat good, but like for me, when like 8:30, 9 p.m. hits, all I want to do is just get in bed and just throw on like some milk boys or, something like just to completely
Yeah.
just forget about work. But at the same time, like I, I have had blue light glasses and I've just felt like they haven't noticed a difference. So I just stopped wearing them because they were kind of annoying. But I don't know. Is there like a pair of blue light glasses that are like, well recommended and will make like a massive difference on that?
Um, you know, I don't know like if there's a way to really test this. I know there's different ways how you can kind of like shine light through it, and there's like web pages where you can go and you can look at like it'll have like a color spectrum, and there'll be like blue and green and red, and you can put the glasses on and certain colors will disappear, and you're like, okay, my blue light black blocking glasses work. I think some of it is kind of gimmicky because I just can't understand how like one pair of glasses is going to cost me $150, and how is that so much different from the pair that's going to cost me 30.
Mm-hmm.
um I do, there's some good brands. There's one called Raw Optics. The other one, gosh, I can't even remember the brand that I use. My wife just got them for me actually as a gift. They're a well-known brand. I think it's the one that Paul Saladino endorses.
Right.
Um, they're a reputable brand. So before that, I was just using, like for years, I was using, they're called Uvex, and they're like $8 on Amazon, and they're hideous. I mean, they're like construction glasses that go all around your face. And so I wore those for years, and I thought they worked really well. It could have been placebo, but almost every time I'd put those on, within an hour, I was like, I'm kind of ready for bed. Because there's something about that relaxing kind of amber tint. Even in my apartment, I have certain lights set to an app. So at a certain time of night, I shift them all, and I shift them all to red.
Oh
So
yeah.
after a time of night, like there is no overhead fluorescent lights on in my house. And then I also put the glasses on, and I'm telling you, like within an hour, I'm ready for bed usually. Especially if I'm like reading a book. I think what you're talking about with the YouTube, I think that's important. That decompression, right? Like that separation from like, okay, the workday is ending, and now I'm getting into this kind of routine where that sleep hygiene and that routine is a big part of it, because it's telling your brain, okay, it's time to sleep when I do the same thing each night. So that's key. I think as long as you are blocking the blue light, and as long as it's not something super stimulating, like probably shouldn't watch a really scary movie right before bed. You probably shouldn't be watching like political Instagram reels, because you're going to get real fired up and angry and just like go to bed in a bad mood. So as long as it's like lighthearted and fun, a lot of people read fiction before bed because you're not like thinking, you're not like learning. So yeah, those are kind of some of the things for sleep too.
Yeah, no. I'm a pussy, so I don't watch scary movies at all. I couldn't watch it at any time of day, whether it's 7 in the morning or midnight. But yeah, like I pretty much watch something that makes me laugh. That's what I try to watch before bed. And I've heard this
Yeah.
before, like the guy's brand or whatever is like the happiest man on earth. I forget who it is, but basically he says if you go to bed and like you laugh a lot before you go to bed, you wake up happier the next day. Right. I don't know if it's true, but like, I wake up feeling pretty good every day and I always look forward to getting up and getting out of bed the next day. And like, yeah, man, like yeah, like you said, it's good reference there where it's like you just like kind of use that as the I guess context for your mind to switch off and start, unwinding for the day. So yeah, I definitely
Laughter,
agree with that.
laughter is medicine. too.
Yeah, man.
So
It is.
one of the things I do is like I watch stand-up comedy before bed.
Nice.
And I don't know what it is about stand-up comedy, but if I can get laughing before bed, it just like it shuts off everything from the day. So I think yeah, laughter before bed is great. That's something that everybody should do.
Yeah, man. And speaking of laughter, Colin, so I have your Twitter up here, and there's a guy that I see in the top right. His name's Jason Wojo, I believe. A lot of a
Nice.
lot of people have been laughing about this guy in the last couple of days. Like I'd seen his ads and stuff before, like around the place, and he's obviously doing some pretty controversial stuff. I think he's doing it intentionally, but I saw
Yes.
briefly one of your posts about like is the term physiognomy?
Physiognomy.
Physiognomy. Sorry, forgive my lack of knowledge there, but like so for what you were saying about his physiog, I'll let you say the word from the physiognomy. Um,
Yeah.
like it comes across as like untrustworthy and like so can you give me like the cliff notes on like physiognomy and like how that can kind of I guess help or hurt people in maybe certain situations?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up because we can talk about like the scientific part of health, right? Stuff that I can back up with a research article. But then there's the real esoteric stuff, which I'm also really into. The stuff that is more like intuitive, is more not necessarily like evidence based, but a lot of things that people can agree on just based on like anecdotal evidence. Physiognomy, I mean, I'm sure there's still research on it, but it's basically like how someone's physical appearance is an outward expression of like their personality and their motives and kind of who they are at their core actually shows on their physical. So if you've ever seen somebody that's like almost like glowing, right? Like they have this aura of just amazing energy and you're like, what is that person doing? I want to talk to them. And you talk to them and they're excited and they're enthusiastic and you're like, okay, that makes sense. That this person's super positive and it's showing on their face. It's showing on their posture. It's showing on their skin. And then the people that are like super negative and their posture's bad and they have a horrible look on their face and that like something's going on with that person, whether it's like a health issue or a mental issue. Intuitively you kind of pick up on these things. And this is kind of controversial because we're in this era of like body acceptance and like everybody's beautiful and all of that. You know exactly what I'm talking about. I don't have
Yeah,
to
yeah,
elaborate. So attraction, we are attracted to people for a certain reason, right? Like symmetry of the face indicates that you probably had good vitamin status throughout your development as a child, right? And so that's a healthy organism. So when I see that, when I look at my wife's face and I say, oh my gosh, she's symmetric, she's beautiful, that in my brain is going, okay, this is someone that I want to at a very like evolutionary level, I want to advance my genetics with that woman. Like I want to give her my offspring. I want her to carry my offspring because she's obviously healthy. In women, you think wide hips, it's childbearing hips. A lot of these like physical features are an indication of your health, actually. Clear skin, right? Like skin is a reflection of what's going on in your gut. So if you've got a ton of acne, if you got rosacea and eczema, something's probably going on health wise, whether it's autoimmune, whether it's inflammatory bowel disease or intestinal permeability, something like that. But there's some sort of inflammation going on that I clue in when I see someone like that. And I say, well, there's probably something health related going on. So this physiognomy, to tie back to him, he's got a sort of weaselly, sly look to him that you pick up on almost right away. And it's his body language, it's the way he talks. And you pick up on it and you just know, man, he's not super trustworthy. Or, yeah, he's probably got some vitamin deficiencies, or he's probably like not doing the best mentally. So that's kind of physiognomy, super esoteric, but that's a little bit of how that works, I think.
no man, I love it, and like I believe it. And I mean, I have my own theories on stuff like that too, right? This is not backed by science, but one thing that the government always says here in Australia in particular, I haven't heard in America, but they used to have this huge advertising campaign. And it was like, there's nothing healthy about a tan, right? And I think,
Oh,
well, right, if I stood a tan person, a pale person together, I think the tan person looks healthier. They look way better. Like, and I'm just like, we've lived out, like, if you think of the human race, we didn't have buildings and, we'd maybe sleep in a shelter, but we would have been outside all day in the sun,
yeah,
right? And so I'm like, I
exactly.
refuse to believe that the sun is obviously, if you like really cook yourself and get burned ridiculously every day and have a really shit diet and consume a lot of chemicals, sure, it's probably bad, right? But at the same time,
Yep.
man, like, I think looking pale is unhealthy. Like, I think it's good to be tan, but that's my own theory. I could be completely wrong, and but I deeply, truly believe that. Like, instinctively, intuitively, like you said, I look at a tan person, I think, oh, that person looks like a lot healthier than someone who doesn't. But
Yeah,
yeah,
they've been active outside. They got vitamin D, so their bones are healthy and their hormones are healthy, and it's so easy to see. I agree. The whole anti-sun campaign is just like it's such nonsense to me. Of course, don't go out and get like second-degree sunburn. I'm not advocating for that, but I'm also not advocating for like slathering chemicals all over your skin. Like, just if you're starting to get a little red, then go under an umbrella, put some clothes on, but don't put all of these like foreign chemicals that you have no idea on your largest organ. It just doesn't make sense to me, but that's what's going
yeah,
on.
I can attest that firsthand. Like, my mom very like, you know, always like very protective. Like, it's like a mother, protector of their kid. Don't get sunburn. Here, sunscreen. And like, man, every time I'd come out of the sun, my face would be so red, right? And I always thought I was getting sunburn, right? Then I started to, like, when I first connected with some of these people, like I mentioned earlier, like started to learn about chemicals and stuff, and like I'd never even considered it. And I was like, well, what are some alternatives? Like, oh, well, you could use like something like coconut oil, mate. Since that day, I have not put any chemical on my skin. I might have borrowed my girlfriend's moisturizer like once or twice when I didn't have any, but the only thing that goes on my skin is coconut oil, right? And like,
Awesome.
I've had guys come up to me and say, man, you have the best skin I've ever seen. I don't think my skin is that good. But anyway, before that, it was terrible. And like, I would go in the sun for 20 minutes and come out and my face would be stinging. I didn't realize it was the chemicals from the sunscreen. So, yeah, man, I think the chemicals cause more harm than good. And, like you said, get some shade, put a hat on, get under umbrella, and yeah, don't lather yourself in shit that you have no idea what it is. Yeah, I couldn't
Yep.
agree more.
And I mean, correlation isn't causation, but ever since the advent of sunscreen, the more that we've used it, the more skin cancers have been around. Part of that could be that we're just testing for it more often. Part of it could be the horribly inflammatory omega-6 laden diets that we're eating. But yeah, I don't think sunscreens are doing quite the benefit that we're told they're doing.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I could go down a whole rabbit hole on that, but we won't go there. But anyway, Colin, maybe just to kind of like wrap things up here, like, what would be like, I guess, I know we kind of talk about a few things, but what would be like a one sentence piece of advice you would give to someone who's, looking to get into optimal, health and physique in, 2023?
So I'm going to say a sentence and then I'm going to elaborate on it if that's okay.
Please, of course.
So um, I'm going to say live like your great great grandparents. And the reason I say that is because I think a lot of people, there's this whole like, um, we should mimic hunter gatherers. We should try to live like people lived 100,000 years ago. And although I think there's some merit to that, there's also like, we can't relate to that. It's just such a different time, and like, yeah, it's just hard to be able to say that we can mimic that. But I like to say, like, where did your ancestors come? Like, mine were kind of Northwestern European, I guess you could say. And one of the problems with America is that we kind of let go of our cultures. Like, we come to America, now we're American, but like, what are we? Like, I'm Irish and Dutch and Welsh, and so I should be trying to, like, if I could call up my ancestors that were living in Ireland and be like, hey, what what stew should I make? Like, what recipe should I make for dinner? And they're like, oh, well, you need to eat more potatoes and like drink more milk because like our ancestors have always drank milk. Versus like a different part of the world, um, probably never drank milk, probably didn't eat potatoes, but they ate a ton of fruit and a lot of meat. Like if they could call up their great grandmother and say like, hey, what did you eat 150 years ago? And she was like able to tell them. I think that's a better way to look at it, than try to like live like a caveman or Neolithic, or try to like cut all of your carbs out and like only eat meat. I think there needs to be like a happy medium, and I think just try to live like, before there was all this modernity. Try to live as close as you can to what your ancestors were living like. And I think a lot of the common themes is like there was a lot more socialization. There was a lot more, not necessarily like going to the gym and busting out like a CrossFit wad, but they were just like moving. They were gardening. They were a lot of like more activity that wasn't necessarily working out. Eating just real ingredients, foods with real ingredients, whether it was plants or animals. These things were real and they weren't covered in chemicals. There were no GMOs. So if you can mimic that as much as possible, I think that's one takeaway. So live like your great great grandparents, like your ancestors.
Great advice, man. I love it. And Colin, where can people find you?
So I'm on Twitter at Collin of one. So that's kind of a play on words. My name's Collin, and N of one. So I'm kind of a self experimenter. So I'm my own N of one. And so that my Twitter, I have some ebooks that I've released recently. I'm also on Instagram at the same name. I don't post as much on Instagram, but I'm probably gonna start posting a little bit more like short form, like video content and stuff like that. Those are the two main areas where I'm at right now. I'm sure I'll grow a little bit more, but I think Twitter is probably the best place to start. That's where I put most of my content out.
Perfect. Amazing, man. Thank you for joining me. It was yeah, it was a pleasure learning.
Yeah, this was a really good chat. So thanks for having me on, and yeah, this was fun.